Right, today, handling and netting koi is an absolute essential part of the hobby. I'm going to teach you all my little hacks, secrets, whatever it is, techniques to make you pro level at this just by watching this short video. There's very simple equipment to all this. You don't need too much. A pan net, a koi sock, a decent bowl, and the job's a good one. The important bit in all this is the technique, and that's what I'm going to teach you today for free. So sit tight and learn from a guy who's been doing this for 20 odd years how to do it like a pro. Right, now I'm not going to lie, this bit might get incredibly boring. However, you need to know how to pick a good one of these, because without a decent net, you can likely do a load of damage and you'll make life a hell of a lot harder. Now, there's two choices for me. Pan net is the only option as far as I'm concerned that mitigates all the problems and risks and potential damages in using it. Now, there's two general types of construction for these. We've got the aluminium poles and the wooden handled ones. Either will work. These are fantastic because as a koi farmer, one of the most important things, because we're all very tight as well, is that we get longevity out of one of these. Now, the wooden handled ones that are made generally outside of Japan tend not to last as long. The Japanese wooden handled ones are amazing, the finest koi net ever made. However, they're hard to get in the UK and they're so incredibly expensive. Very few people would be able to get their hands on one anyway. However, these aluminium poles, this one in particular is a brand of note, Koi Net Supplies, absolutely fantastic. The things I look for generally is the construction around the head here, because that really needs to be solid. You can get a lot of wear and tear on them and a lot snapping. I tend to find that with a lot of the wooden handled ones made outside of Japan is that the longevity just isn't the same. The nice thing with these as well, every bit is actually replaceable very easily, which is fantastic. Now, the things you need to be really make sure is that you get the decent sized pan according to the size of the fish that you've got. Without incredible skill, and even with incredible skill, you'll likely damage your koi if the pan is too small for the size of fish that you're netting. Secondly, comes the mesh. Now let's cover up my ugly mutt and actually look at what we've got here. This mesh, we don't want these to be too coarse. However, the fish doesn't spend a lot of time in it, so that's not super important. But the size of the hexa mesh is very crucial. And this is more for movement in the water. Now, I don't like it to be too fine, because what that'll create is a lot of drag in the water, and that is a real problem as well, because you need some degree of mobility. So this is the size that I go with. It's a larger hexa mesh, but it's absolutely fantastic and does the job perfectly. Next up, and this is something not a lot consider, is the depth of this pan. This is actually the bare minimum depth, I would say, is required. If you get these too shallow, more like this, the net actually becomes a springboard, and that's something that you don't want either, because the koi will be rubbing around on that top there, and that is going to cause damage, trust me, because we need to use this more of a guiding force than actually a landing net. That is another thing. You'll see landing nets from carp fishing. Those for me are also actually too deep. The reason there is, although they're generally gentle and give the fish space, they also give the fish loads of opportunity to jump. You'll see that when we get onto netting techniques, why that is incredibly important to avoid. But yeah, depth of pan, this at the bare minimum, I don't actually know what size that is, but you can get an idea from that where it wants to be. Anything tighter than that, I would avoid. And preferably, I'd probably like about an inch more drop on that for my absolute ideal net. The last bit we should discuss is the pole. Now, this is not absolutely crucial. You need to make sure you get the right size. As you're going to see, this net is actually a little bit too small for these ponds that we're going to do some netting examples in. The wooden handled ones that I use are about half a metre longer. They're going to be ideal. You need to be able to reach over to the other side of your pond at the very least with the handle that you buy. Now, don't get one that's too heavy because what you're going to find is they are incredibly hard to move through the water and will make your life a little bit more difficult. Again, these koi net supplies aluminium handles are fantastic. This is the thicker, heavier one. The lighter one that they do is absolutely fine as well. I am more concerned about this connection at the head, because as you're generally lifting upwards, that puts a lot of pressure on the net, and if you do that too quickly, the likelihood is over time they're going to snap. So pole wise, like I say, it's not the most important part, but you don't want it to be absolutely weighing a ton, because that again is just going to make life more difficult in the netting process. Plastic is one I would avoid completely. I think that's just going to be no good. And also I actually prefer a fixed size handle over something telescopic. Now I understand that in your garden you might not want a great big massive net kicking around, but I just find the telescopic ones again are just a disaster waiting to happen, and a piece of equipment you're likely going to need to buy over and over again because they do break. Just another thing to bear in mind with your pole choice, you want the net to be absolutely rigid in the water, because I need that net to go where I want it to go. It's very, very important. Let me just show you the difference here between these two. Look, as I shake them, actually looking at the heads of it, you can see there's a massive difference. This pole, in general, when it's in the water, it tends to actually lag behind. There's a lot of bend in there and it lags behind. The net is not necessarily where I want it at that moment in time, and a split second can make a huge difference with this stuff. With that aluminium pole, this thing is absolutely solid. It is where I want it to be at any point. It glides perfectly. So please do bear that in mind. Right, time for an example of how to net a koi correctly. The biggest, I'm going to start with one of the don'ts, because this is where you will fail. Do not chase, do not try and match the speed of a koi in the water, because you will lose, I promise you that. The biggest secret here is trying to be 2 steps in front. Now I say that because over the 20 odd years I've been doing this, I can get 2 steps in front, but it's not always that easy. Likewise, if you go too slow, you're going to be moving around the whole pond for absolutely hours. What I will say as well is be clear up front with what you're doing. Be clear in your own mind. Make sure, if you're netting 2 or 3 fish, for example, don't just chase one and be distracted by another as you're going along. Focus on the one fish that you're going for and get that job completed. Now this bit I'm going to show you is just the netting process. No other bit to it, we'll get to that later on. So I've got this pond of fish in front of me. Right now I'm going to identify that I'm going to attempt to catch this kikukuryu. So first of all, go in with the net. Now what I'm actually doing at the minute is watching the way that fish is actually going and where I want to land it. So right now I can see it swimming off that way. What I'm going to try and do is just get in front of it a little bit here, and I slowly start to close in. Now I'm looking all the time, look, so now as it's changed direction, I'm pulling back just to get in front of it again. Right here, I'm trying to get in front of it before I close, and slowly all the time I'm just trying to close the gap. What if you look at the angle of my net, it's almost vertical in the water, because what that's doing is as I close in here, it's giving me the opportunity. You see the fish now in the bottom end of my pan. Look at the angle I've got on my net and where the fish's head is. That was quite awkward where it's just gone. So I'm trying to keep the fish at this angle, just in case if that fish decides to jump, I've got the rest of the pan of the net here, so it's only going to jump into the top of the pan. If I'm completely flat like this coming up, the fish has got the advantage here. It's got every opportunity just to jump off that net and we've got to go again. Always try and keep the angle on my net the opposite direction to the way the fish's head's facing. So right now, look, I've got that absolutely spot on. If we change that angle and it starts to come this way, I may want to twist and go that way. But that's the general premise of actually netting the fish up. Now, that fish was right there. Let's repeat that process again with another fish till it really sinks in. You'll also tend to find that you'll have a favoured side in this as well if you're left or right-handed. One will just feel more natural. In this case, there's an asagi there. Now, they are known to be nuts. And I'm just trying to get out in front again and be a step in front of it, 2 steps if I can, on where it's going. Now, here it is, look. Look at that angle on my net again. Now, trapping them against the wall can be quite useful, but it also can be dangerous. But if you look right now where I've got it, we're slowly coming up. Look at the angle I've got on my net. Look where I'm trying to keep the head. Right now, how I'm holding it, look. So if that fish jumps, I'm in control of the situation. And right now, from this position where we're at, is the perfect position to then move this towards a bowl or towards the sock. Right, now for the purpose of the video, I'm going to show you how not to do it and what happens. Never go in like a raging bull. I'm going to do it in this instance for the purpose of the video, just to show you how much the fish will embarrass you if you try doing it that way. The last tip I've got for you, and this is very important, you're going to hear me say this a few times, before you even attempt to catch the fish, be clear what you're doing with it when you've caught it, and make sure you've got the equipment to hand. Whether it's going into a bowl that's floating on the pond, or you're going to remove it from the pond to a bowl on the floor or some other place via a sock net. It's absolutely crucial up front, you know, in order to avoid any damage being done. The last thing you want is the fish flapping around on the pan net. You have no idea what you're doing with it, or you're scrambling for your equipment. And if you're not comfortable doing it yourself, make sure you've got somebody there to help you as well. Now, just to give you an example and show off a little bit, I'm going to show you in real time how easy this is without doing this in a stressful way. Let's catch 3 fish and see how long it takes, starting from now. Even when we're on a long run like this, look, get out in front, get it where I want it, slowly close the space. That one was a bit lively, a lot attempted to jump, but we had the angle on the net to sort it. 3, as easy as that. But all throughout there, you'll notice I was 1-2 steps in front, slowly putting the fish where I want it as I close down that space. But I've got the right tool, and that makes the job a hell of a lot easier. Next up, once you've caught your fish, you need somewhere to put it. These are 2 purpose-made koi bowls at the moment. These can be used floating on the pond, or they can be positioned on the floor. That's entirely your choice. It really depends what you're doing as well. If you just wanted to have a quick look, or maybe take a mucus biopsy or something like that, then having it in the pond might be absolutely adequate enough. Or in reality, you might actually be better off, depends how comfortable you are handling the fish, with it on the floor so it's planted. Obviously, when you're working with a bowl on the water like that, it's not sturdy, you've got movement. Now, when it comes to the bowl, it doesn't have to be a specifically made koi bowl. They're generally made in blue. That's just been like an industry standard. The fish, from a viewing perspective, tend to look absolutely fantastic in a blue bowl. But you can use anything. As ever, purpose-made koi bowls are not the cheapest, although this one made by, I think it's Superfish or Koi Pro, are actually really quite affordable. Even that 80cm one is. Again, the gold standards with these is the Japanese equipment, but again, it's hard to get and they're incredibly expensive once they're imported into the UK. However, that being said, again, you need to be very clear in your mind the purpose of what you need to do and how comfortable you are in relation to where you put it. There's not too much more really to be said about the actual bowl itself. Like I say, if these are out of reach from a budget perspective, you can use something else, so long as it does hold the water and you've not been using it for anything else where there might be any nasty chemicals or toxins to come from it. So other than that, now I'm going to show you use cases, in particular using it in the pond, and how I would also use it when it's on the floor as well. So in this particular instance, I am going to be netting a fish from the pond and transferring it to a bowl that's sat on the pond as well. Now, if you've not got a sock and you're wanting to move it, you can actually use this as a way of transferring to an external bowl by first placing it in a bowl on the pond. What you should never ever do, and this is an absolute golden rule, is just lift the fish on the net into an exterior bowl. That is going to cause so much damage. I never recommend doing that. Now, the important part of this, not only referencing to the netting techniques moving up to it, is to get the bowl first of all at the right level. Now, this job is easier with 2 people, but that's not always possible. So I'm going to show you how today you can do that just with 1 person. The thing you need to do first is get the level of the bowl right. So most people tend not to put enough water in, but what that means right now is, look, the bowl floating is sat so high. This is a problem. So I'm going to put a lot more water in, so the lip of the bowl is already floating very close to the surface. That's essential. And then what we need to do is decide which end of the pond we're going to approach this from. So in this instance, I'll come from this left-hand side, so I want the bowl to already be on my right-hand side in order to do this smoothly. So back to the netting techniques, we're going to get the fish caught. You see as it comes up. Now the important part to this, there's 2 ways you can do it, but first we see I've got the fish, I've got the head facing that way, I've got the net angled in case of it jumping, and I've got the fish sat on about 1/3 of the net like that. Now as this is, because the pan's big enough and the fish isn't too big, I can actually do this without needing to take my hands off the net. As I approach it, I drop one side of the bowl. When it's gone under enough so the fish doesn't hit it, I let the fish into the bowl. Now typically the fish will go down. As it is doing, you see the bowl still floating. I can just gently remove some water. Job done. Now I might have made that look a little bit too easy. So let's do it now, but using a method whereby we will manually control the bowl to make sure it doesn't sink too low. Okay, so I've got the same starting point. The bowl, lots of water in it, so the lip is not floating too far above the surface. Again, you see as I come up, good angle on the net. Now what I'm going to need to do is just switch round here. Same angle on the net, look, but now I've just switched, so I need to be holding this net with 1 hand, still in the same position, a lip up, a fish in the last 1/3 there, nicely balanced. So I'll get the bowl with my other hand, just gently tip it down. Now what I need to make sure is I don't want the fish to hit that lip that's submerged in the bowl. So it needs to be down enough that I can bring the fish in like this. And then just before I release the net, I'll pull the bowl out slowly to let some water go, and done. Again, I apologise if I made that look too simple, but with a bit of practice, it really can be that easy. You just need the know-how and the right technique to do it. So one thing I would advise, when you've got the fish in the bowl, the depth of water in the bowl, now this applies to it being on the pond or on the floor, the depth of water will play a big part in encouraging the fish to jump. The more depth it has, the more trajectory it's got to get its tail and get the power that it needs to make a jump. So from here where we are now, I'm going to get some water out of the bowl just by gently lifting. Now what I'm going to do, look, is as the fish moves that way, I'm just going to change the angle I'm tipping at, because obviously I don't want the fish to jump out. I want to be tipping one way and the fish's head pointing the other, so I stay in control. And I'm going to aim to get that water level right down to something more like that, where there's just a tiny bit of clearance over the dorsal fin. That won't stop jumping, it can still attempt it, but what it does is it loses the ability to get the angle that it needs in order to really get the power from its tail. So that right now is a fantastic depth for that kind of size fish and where we're at. Now, there's no real secret to this part. If you're using a bowl on the floor, it's all just about preparation. Pay attention to what I've just said about the water level. You want to make sure you set the water level not too high, exactly the same as the end result of having it in the pond. So all I do, get the bowl where I want it. I'll generally use a koi sock, or you can use a bucket just to get my water in. and roughly gauge, you can see here from this, that right now for that particular fish we're looking at is a fantastic starting depth in that bowl. So now we just need to decide how we're going to transfer it from the pond to there, and that's what we're going to discuss next. Now on to moving fish from A to B and the most essential piece of equipment for doing it. Now there are levels to this, and I'm going to be quite rigid here in the piece of equipment I do recommend, and this comes from years of trying everything out there. Koi socks are generally the best method to move a fish from one place to another. Now there are two main different types. The Japanese ones, if you can get hold of them, are by far and away there's leagues apart from those and ones manufactured in any other country. They're fantastic. They really are made for purpose by people who know what people need to do this job properly. The absolute best piece of equipment to buy is one of these ones. Now this is the Matsuda sock. This is completely watertight, and that is the one that I recommend you get. It's the most useful and the one that's probably going to do the least amount of damage. That area of the sock completely watertight, and here this was actually an upgrade from many years ago. The mesh to actually control the amount of water in the sock as well without letting the fish out. It makes it a hell of a lot easier. You get these in wooden handle, plastic handled, short handles, long handles. That really comes down to preference in how you're using it. Then we get the one that we see the most in the market in the cheapest form. This is a Japanese version of this, but my thoughts on it are still the same. The quality build of this, by the way, has been amazing. I have had this thing, I don't even know, it might be 15 years now, and it's still going strong. However, this one does not hold any water. So the minute you lift the fish up, it completely drains off and leaves the fish in that wet sock. I'm not a big fan of these at all. I don't think it's the best option. If we compare it to this, you see there, look, that's just the water dripping off the sock, completely watertight. This gives you the most amount of control and versatility and is the best piece to have in your armoury. Now, if they're unaffordable, of course, that will do the job for you. And that's actually a better option than the next piece I'm going to show you, which will be the absolute cheapest option. And that's one of these, a plastic bag. However, believe it or not, you really need to know what you're doing with one of these to actually use it properly. It's not as easy as it looks, trust me. You've got to get it right and know what you're doing, otherwise you can create a lot of damage from using one of these. However, there are some basic principles that will cross over into all of it, so let's get stuck into that. So as a continuation, so previously I showed you netting and transferring the fish to a bowl on the pond. In this instance, I'm going to show you transferring it to a sock as one person. You can do this with two, but there's still some basic fundamentals, whether it's one person or two people, whatever you're more comfortable with, basic principles to using a sock to first of all get the fish into it, and that's what we're going to focus on right now. So again, we've got the fish, look at that angle on my net, look where the fish's head is. We bring that along to where I want to be. You can see I'm generally holding the fish in the bottom third of the pan, trying to keep the bottom just above as well so it can't get out. Now I get my sock, and if you look at how I'm actually holding that to do it, you've got to pay close attention not to lift the fish out of the water too much on the net. But likewise, you can see here, look, I've got both the bottom of the sock and the handle in one grip. Now, when you're using a sock, you really want to get the head in first, so that's where I'm going to be aiming. At this point as well, there's no water in the sock. A big mistake that people make in general with these is getting too much water in throughout all the parts of the process of moving a fish. So you can see now, look, I'm aiming to go straight in at where the head is, drop the bottom of the sock in, and scoop the fish into the sock, and as quickly as I can, get it down and deeper into the sock. Now there's a decent amount of water in there right now, enough just to keep the fish, look, it's calm and secure, while we then get the sock in the proper position to move it from A to B. So as I just said previously, it's important not to get too much water in here. The more water there is, the more the fish can move, and the more the fish can actually gain control and potentially do it self-harm. Now, how I like to use this, and again, the mistake people make is it's important to get the sock stretched out in order so the fish can actually lay out within the sock. So as I get it out like this, first of all, that can actually have less water in it than we've got right now. So using this particular sock, I've got my hand right at the end. I'm going to keep hold of that, and what you do is we just lift this end up and let a little bit of water drain out of the mesh. So I've reduced that water right down now. Keeping hold of that end, what's very, very important to do, now don't worry, with a smaller fish like this, don't worry too much about where the fish's head at. You're going to struggle to control that. But what we're going to do here now, because what we don't want, I can see the fish's head is actually pointing out of here. I could potentially lift that now and the fish attempt to jump and it could get out of that end. So what I'm going to do is just twist the handle one way, and that actually locks off that end of the sock completely as well. Then keeping the sock stretched out, just simply move it over into there. Now what I'm going to do is put a little bit of water into this end of the sock. So just to create more water, more weight to push that through. Let the fish come out the other end like that. Now you can see how simple and easy that process was. That's very, very little stress for the fish. You can now see it's in there. The water level's absolutely spot on as we look at the fish. The dorsal's just breaking the surface or just sat under when the fish is right on the bottom of the bowl to reduce that jump in as well. Absolutely fantastic. These are a great bit of kit for that, but it's very, very important to remember, and we will show it with a bigger fish in a moment. Keep that end secure and keep that end locked to avoid disaster. Right, now again, just for further practice, the fish is in the bowl, we need to get it back in the pond. So you see how I've got my sock held, already got that end secured. Now the bit here is, look, I'm going to try and just control it from the head, look. So straight in there, and what I want to do is get the fish straight into the middle of the sock like that again. Get my grip. Again, I'm just going to let a little bit of water out of there because I don't need it all. And then lock my end off and into the pond. Now when you're going back into the pond, this is even easier. The best way to do this, get the sock all the way down, get loads of water running through so it fully opens up the sock, and away we go. Now we can see we've got a lively one here, so I'm not going to get too close right now, but I'm just going to try and keep in front, look, trying not to aggravate it more, because this will likely trying to create an opportunity to jump. You can see it's moving up the water every now and again. I've got to be mindful of that as well. The Yamabukis can be a bit like this. You see, look, I'm just slowly trying to not getting too close instantly because it will beat me now. I'm moving up as it moves up. See the position? There we go. Now I just need to get my position. As we do, look, pan up, and we're in. Now, bad preparation, the bowl wasn't down enough, so there's no way I could do that right now without grabbing hold of the bowl. Need to submerge that down, fish in, just slowly let a bit of water back out, and we're done. The purpose of this is to show you how to use one of these in case it's the only option that you've got. The biggest secret up front, water again. You don't want too much water. Now this is with a bigger fish, with the power they have, that's where more skill actually comes in to using a bag, and you need to make sure it's a decent bag as well. If they're not, to be honest with you, even at this one, with a big fish, I'd want to be double bagging it. So we've got the fish in the bowl. First we need to make sure we've got the water level right. We'll get that down. And what we're aiming to do, so I'm going to hold the bag now in this kind of position, so I've got it open and I can control the lip of the bag. Now I want to go in front of the fish because I want the head. I need to control it from that perspective. So I'm going to go straight down, look, get the bottom of the bag trapped in. Now without too much water, I want the fish to go to the bottom of the bag so I can start to get control. Now what I want to do with this is get the nose into the bottom corner. So from here, I'm going to get the bag in this position, almost like a sock. So I've got two corners and a close end there. But what you need to start doing is getting the air out of the bag and actually wrapping this down so the fish actually can't move. So with it being smaller, it won't be easier, but you can see there what I've done now. I've wrapped that right down.
You can actually attempt to get some water out, but that's going to make it harder for yourself. You see there, with some water out now, it gives me more control to get closer to the bottom of the fish. I've created myself a handle there, and now at the top I've also got another handle ready to lift this fish. As we do, you can see, look, I've got full control. Now this is exactly the right way. Look, there's not a lot of water in there whatsoever, but the fish cannot move. It's in there and it's calm. All we need to do then, you transfer it into the bowl, keep hold of this side, open up that end, and slowly we're in. So the real skill to this bit, because the fish was relatively calm then, again, I might have played my part in that, but it's not to panic too much if they get into the bag. If they get into the bag and there's too little water to begin with, you might find it flaps a lot. So in that instance, we've got just the right amount of water. By getting it out, then you get control, but as you get that water out, it's really important you get that locked down to create that kind of space in the bag, regardless of the size of the fish. The next piece of equipment, these babies. Now, handling koi in Japan is actually almost seen as an art form. There is a bit of a myth that your hands can do damage. Absolute bollocks. I've never known it. This is the way this has been done in Japan for a long, long time. But it is an art form. It's one of the hardest to learn, and it really is practice makes perfect. What I would say, and the biggest part of this is, there's no good showing off. If you don't feel confident in doing this, use a sock or use a bag. And there comes a point as well at a certain size of fish, although some are incredibly good at it, unfortunately, I have very small hands. I'm not even afraid to admit it. When fish get to a certain size, they are just too big for me to safely do that in that way. And that comes a point, why take the risk? Even the pros will at that point use bags or socks or whatever it is to maneuver a fish from one place to another. It doesn't matter how good you are, there's always that chance you make a slip. I see breeders do it all the time. I do make them mistakes myself every so often. However, it is my general preferred method, because when you are very good at it, I believe there's even less chance of doing damage through handling than putting a fish into a sock where there's netting where it could snag a fin or something like that, versus using your hands. But I reiterate again, if you're not confident, please don't do it. For this, I've purposely chosen a typically tricky fish in a saggy. Now, there's a crucial part to this. This fish is not anaesthetised. This is exactly as it is. The first major tip is to know what you're planning to do with the fish. Don't be unsure in your mind where you're heading, what your next step is, or anything like that, because that's a risk, it's a danger. There's a chance the fish is going to catch you out as well. Now, the first and most important part is positioning. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. With correct handling, the head should always be facing you. That's crucial. And we're going to use two hands, one just under the face and one that's going to sit around 2/3 of the way down the fish. Now let me show you that bit first of all. Now as I get the fish into position, what I'm not going to do is faff around with it too much, because that aggravates the fish, it aggravates you. You need to be relatively assertive. Whenever I'm handling a fish, the first thing I go for is the head, always, because that typically gives me control of the fish. So from here, this is the position. One fish there, with my hand generally sat in front of the pec fins, and this second hand sat around just in front of between the anal fin and the pelvic fin. That right there is the position. Whether you're left-handed or right-handed, you can go the other way around. It makes no difference. That's how we're holding it. But look, my hand is in front of the pecs, and at that part, it's between the pelvic fin and the anal fin. Now in this instance, I'm just going to move that straight back into the pond. However, if you're finding the fish tricky, there's an element here that was taught to me by Hisato Nogami when I was 13 years old. Typical Japanese way, I had a 65 centimeter Sankey in front of me. It was an expensive fish. He told me to put it back in the pond. I absolutely soiled myself, but he was going to make me do it regardless. And this fish was fighting, I couldn't quite get the grip, I wasn't comfortable with it. Then he showed me the spinning trick. And this can, not always, just disorientate the fish slightly to give you a better chance. We need to take control of the head, and then all we gently do is spin the fish a few times around. And now you see, for that moment, look, all is calm, but that won't last forever. So now again, I'm always keen, I know what I'm doing, is to not faff around too much, worrying too much. I go in, I get the fish, bang, we're out the water. That is the best way. Now when you've actually got the fish out the water, another top tip here, do not squeeze. If you squeeze, the fish will beat you and it will end up on the floor, I promise you that. So what I'm going to do now is lift it out, and as I lift it out the water, notice what I do. I'm sitting the fish in the palm of my hands, and as the fish moves, I'm creating this kind of movement to move with the fish as it just sits in my hands. Pay close attention to that. You can see now, this is really shaking a lot, but I have got still full control of this fish. If I try to grab that right now, I'm going to lose it, but as it stands, look, it's just sitting in my hands. I'm keeping the right position. I have got control. So now I'm going to run this in real time, moving the fish into there. You can see it in the bowl. I'm going to go straight in, get control of the head, get my hand positioning, up we go, and straight in. All that all happened before the brain of the fish had even any chance to kick in and its stress or worry. You see why it's important. I knew exactly where I was going, got my position, bang, move, rather than prat around with the fish and give it a chance to get worried and become agitated and awkward. So now, just to show you with a smaller fish, then I'm going to show you with a big fish as well. Now the control, this kind of size, this fish is around maybe getting on for 30 cm. But you can see your hands will just be generally closer together, but the premise is still the same, where I want the head, where I want my hand under the head, in front of the pecs, and generally between the pelvic fins and the anal fin. Now you can see again, I'm just letting the fish sit there in my hands. You know, balance and poise is really important in all this, but I'm not squeezing in any way, and I'm keeping full control. And with these, with enough practice, it's easy enough. Look, you get control with the head, you can actually get the balance and do this with one hand with enough practice, getting the fish in the right spot, but again, not squeezing whatsoever. Very simple, but again, we'll show this same process. We're in position, lift and out, and we're away. It's that easy. The thing you want to avoid, again, is too much messing. If you're worried, you're not in position, you're doing, the fish is going to become more aggravated. And then if you never second guess yourself, that's the real hardest part in all this. You get to here, you worry a bit, you give the fish chance to stress. We're from here, boom, we're out, we're into the pond. So we should probably just take a moment to admire this, to be fair. An example of doing this with a bigger fish. This in the bowl is a Sakai Fish Farm 3-year-old male that's cracking on. It might even be at 70 cm already. The fish I've grown from a 15 centimetre Tosai in 2 seasons in these facilities. Just represents everything Sakai's all about. Look, couldn't help, just look at the power in them shoulders. It's a bonkers piece, and male, don't forget that bit. But the point of this, and I've gone with a male as well because they tend to be a bit livelier, is to show you the exact same techniques of getting that fish back into that pond using a handling method, and then you've seen it with a smaller fish in between and with a big one done. But again, all the same things. It's very important. Everything is right, and I know exactly where we're going and what I'm doing beforehand. There's no doubt in my mind. First thing I need to do is get in the bowl, get control, get position, and bang. And even when the big ones rock, we can see, look, I've got my position, I'm not gripping, I'm keeping control, and we get the fish in. So that right there is my definitive guide to netting and handling koi. Practice does make perfect with this stuff. What I don't recommend is practicing by thinking, all right, I'm going to go and catch all my fish just for the sake of it. It is a process. You should only do it when required and keep netting and bowling to a minimum at all times, because it is a stress event. However, when you're doing it, you want to make it the less amount of stress possible, and hopefully by getting the right equipment and using the techniques I've taught you today, you can get to that point. Don't take any unnecessary risks. Do what you're most comfortable with. The bit at the end, the handling, it's amazing to see, and it is an art form, but if you're not comfortable, please don't do it, and stick to using a sock or a bag. Thanks for watching. What's up? Honestly, I don't think people like my videos, because unless I actually take the time to say like and subscribe,
people don't really like. There's a massive drop off. I can't get my head around it, mate, anyway. But I think it's about time that people liked and subscribed. So come on, people, hit the button and do it. I don't want to be miserable. I don't think we're ever going to change, are we?
No, I don't.
I'm the biggest fucking winging it you've ever met.
But it works.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
because we can.
Lost where you were now, aren't you?
Yes, right, let's go.